In a universe overflowing with destruction, power, and rebirth, few villains have ever made the Dragon Ball multiverse stop and ask, were they actually kind of right? Zamasu wasn't your typical tyrant. He wasn't after domination like Frieza, or perfection like Cell. He wasn't driven by primal instinct like Buu, or by revenge like Moro. No, Zamasu was something more terrifying. He was a god with a vision, and worse, a god who truly believed his vision was righteous. At first glance, Zamasu appears to be a divine figure consumed by arrogance. But dig deeper, and his arc becomes one of the most layered tragedies in the entire series. He was a Kaiju who believed in order and beauty, a warrior of the divine who saw mortals constantly tearing apart what the gods built. His descent wasn't just about power, it was about purpose twisted into obsession. He didn't fall because he was evil, fell because he believed no one else cared enough to fix the universe. The story of Zamasu is one of conviction, corruption, and collapse. It's a mirror held up to the gods themselves and to us. Because what happens when the one chosen to protect mortals decides they should no longer exist? This is the rise and fall of Zamasu. Before he became the face of divine judgment, Zamasu was something far more humble. A Kaiju of Universe 10, tasked with observing and guiding mortal civilizations. A deity in training, he was disciplined, intelligent, and supremely skilled in combat, so much so that his potential to become a Kaioshin was undeniable. But beneath that calm and noble surface, something was stirring. Zamasu had a sharp mind and sharper eyes, as he watched mortals across the cosmos wage endless wars, exploit resources, and spiral into self-destruction. He began to ask a question most gods wouldn't dare. Why do we let them live? To Zamasu, mortals were chaos, a failed experiment. No matter how many times they were guided, they returned to violence. Even when given the gift of creation and freedom, they chose war over wisdom. This wasn't a sudden revelation, it was a slow erosion of faith. Every civilization he studied became another nail in the coffin of his trust. His mentor, Gowasu, tried to keep him grounded, teaching that mortals must be observed, not judged. It is not the Kaishin's role to interfere, only to guide. But where Gowasu saw potential and patience, Zamasu saw nah. He couldn't understand why God's beings, with the power to rewrite reality, stand by and watch mortals destroy themselves and each other. And in that growing dissonance, the seeds of radicalism were planted. Zamasu didn't want to dominate, he wanted to cleanse, to correct what he believed the gods were too cowardly to do. But he still hadn't crossed the line. That would come with a single encounter, one that shattered his worldview and set the divine clock ticking toward oblivion. And that's where Goku enters the picture. Zamasu's growing disgust with mortals had always been contained, quiet, measured, and held in check by Gowasu's teachings. But all of that changed the moment he met Son Goku. Brought before the gods through the use of the time ring, Goku stood in front of Zamasu and challenged him to a sparring match, mortal, casually addressing gods as equals. Smiling, excited, not reverent, not respectful. And then he landed a hit. This moment, as brief as it was, shattered something inside Zamasu. He'd already questioned the gods' tolerance for mortals, but Goku's presence confirmed a deeper fear. The divine order was broken. A mortal could rival a god and act like it meant nothing. To Zamasu, Goku wasn't just a threat, he was a symbol. A walking contradiction to everything the gods were supposed to stand above, a being born of chaos, now matching the power of divinity. With zero regard for cosmic hierarchy, Zamasu couldn't understand it. Why would gods allow this? Why would Gowasu respect it? Why did someone like Goku, so casual, so reckless, deserve such strength? That encounter lit the fuse. From that moment on, Zamasu's ideology began to solidify. If mortals could become gods, and gods refused to stop them, then someone had to act. And in his mind, only one being had the conviction to do it right. Justice is not a weakness, it is a strength. Justice is absolute. Justice is the truth of the universe, Zamasu. Thus began the divine betrayal. A Kaiju turned against his kind, not out of madness, but belief. The Zero Mortals plan was born, and Goku unknowingly was its spark. After Goku ignited the spark, Zamasu's convictions twisted into something irreversible. What started as doubt became doctrine, and what started as divine curiosity became genocide. Zamasu's first move was quiet and subtle. He murdered Galwasu, the very master who once tried to guide him toward balance. Then, using the Super Dragon Balls, he made a wish that shook the multiverse. He wished to switch bodies with Goku. The result was Goku Black Zamasu in Goku's body, with Saiyan instinct fused to a godlike purpose. This wasn't just power theft, this was symbolic. Zamasu became the very force he hated, to prove he could wield it correctly. But even this wasn't enough. He crossed timelines and teamed up with another version of himself, creating a divine paradox. Two Zamasus united by ideology and hate. When they fused using the Potara earrings, fused Zamasu was born a god with both immortality and limitless power. He called it justice, but it was tyranny in its purest form. The Zero Mortals plan was Zamasu's crusade. Wipe out all mortal life in every timeline, every corner of the multiverse. No more flawed civilizations. No more chaos. Just divine order. His divine order. What makes Zamasu so chilling is that he didn't want conquest. He wanted cleansing. He believed destruction was creation. His philosophy was not born of greed, but of radicalized idealism. In his mind, he was the only god brave enough to do what all others feared, and that's what makes him dangerous. Because villains driven by ego can be stopped, but villains driven by belief, they rewrite history. Fused Zamasu wasn't just strong, he was righteous in his own twisted eyes. A god who declared, "I am justice incarnate. I am the world." It was two Sans mortals, the very beings he sought to erase who stood in his way. Goku and Vegeta. Together, they didn't just oppose Zamasu physically, they dismantled his beliefs. Zamasu believed mortals were inherently flawed, incapable of learning from their mistakes. But Goku, he was the embodiment of growth. A low-class warrior who reached the realm of the gods through willpower and the desire to surpass himself, not rule others. Goku doesn't crave control. He thrives on experience, on connection, on trust. To Zamasu, that was chaos. To Goku, it was the path to balance. And then there's Vegito perhaps, Zamasu's most poetic challenger. Once a proud prince who saw himself above others, Vegeta knew the taste of arrogance. He knew what it meant to look down on those deemed weaker. But unlike Zamasu, Vegeta changed. Through battles, loss, fatherhood, and redemption, Vegeta evolved beyond ego. He saw strength not as something to enforce, but to protect. His journey was everything Zamasu's could have been if Zamasu had chosen humility over hatred. The irony was brutal. Vegeta was once what Zamasu feared mortals would become. But instead of doubling down on pride, Vegeta became a symbol of mortal potential. In their final clash, it wasn't just ki blasts and transformations. It was ideology versus instinct, control versus freedom, divine judgment versus mortal resilience. Zamasu declared himself the embodiment of justice. But Goku and Vegeta didn't need to declare anything. They just acted. And that, in the end, was more powerful than any speech or godly plan. But even after their defiance, even after their combined efforts as Vegito, it still wasn't enough. Because Zamasu had fused with immortality itself, the gods had one more card to play. Despite being pushed to the edge by Goku and Vegeta, despite being outwitted, outmatched, and outmaneuvered, Zamasu refused to fall. Even after his body was damaged, even when it began to mutate and distort, losing its shape entirely, he endured. His immortality became a curse, twisting him into something grotesque. Part god, part chaos, part screaming void. Fused Zamasu lost his form, but not his will. His essence began to spread beyond his physical body, corrupting the very fabric of reality. He poured into the skies, the ground, the heavens themselves. The multiverse began to rot under his influence. He was no longer just a god, he was conceptual decayed. the physical embodiment of imbalance, a universe infected by broken justice. There is no world without me. I am the world. At this point, the battle wasn't just lost. It was unwinnable. Not even Vegito could stop him. Not even mortals could contain him. Oh, Goku did the unthinkable. He called on the one being whose power sat at the top of the multiversal food chain. Zeno, the Omni King. The childlike god with the authority to erase entire realities with a wave. And Zeno didn't hesitate. In a blinding instant, Zamasu's world was erased. Not just his body, not just his mind, his entire timeline undone in a flash of divine light. This wasn't justice. This was finality. And in that moment, Zamasu's ultimate irony played out in full. The one who claimed to be justice incarnate, it was destroyed by a being who didn't even bother to ask why. His fall wasn't just physical, it was philosophical. His ideology became so dangerous, so invasive, that it left the gods with only one response: eradication. A god who believed in absolute control was wiped out by the very chaos he wanted to erase. But the fallout of his crusade didn't end with his death. Zamasu may have been erased by Zeno, but ideas don't vanish so easily. His crusade left a scar across time, space, and the gods themselves. After Zamasu's erasure, Trunks' timeline was completely wiped out. Not just him or his people, but everything. Trunks and Mai were forced to abandon their world and live in a timeline that wasn't theirs. For all their resistance, all their sacrifice, their reward was exile. And that was Zamasu's ultimate tragedy. Even in defeat, he won something. His philosophy, his hatred changed the way the gods looked at mortals. The very idea that a supreme Kai could become so radicalized sparked fear throughout the cosmos. It forced the gods to look inward. If one Kai could turn, could others follow? A single god could poison time itself. Who else might fall? But perhaps Zamasu's greatest impact was on Goku. After witnessing Zeno erase an entire timeline, Goku began to understand the fragility of the multiverse and the terrifying imbalance between divine power and moral judgment. He saw that the gods' beings like Zamasu, Zeno, even the Grand Priest, hold cosmic authority without being bound by mortal values. And that realization stuck with him. Zamasu wasn't just a villain, he was a wake-up call. His arc changed the tone of Dragon Ball Super. It marked a shift from simple power scaling to cosmic responsibility, from rivalries to philosophical clashes. The idea that a god could be wrong and a mortal could be right created a narrative tension we had never seen before. His legacy was one of warning about belief taken too far, about power without humility, and about what happens when ideals become obsession. The gods remembered him. The mortals suffered because of him. And the universe was never the same. But the final contrast, it came not from Zamasu himself, but from the Grand Priest, a figure who represented everything Zamasu wasn't: balance, order, and divine calm. While Zamasu tried to force divinity onto the universe through destruction and domination, another figure quietly existed as the true embodiment of divine order: the Grand Priest. Unlike the other gods, the Grand Priest doesn't speak often. He doesn't interfere, doesn't need to display his power. And yet, from the moment he steps onto the scene, his presence is undeniable. Calm, collected, untouchable. Where Zamasu's godhood was loud and chaotic, the Grand Priest's was quiet and absolute. He's the attendant of Zeno, the Omni King, and is widely regarded as one of the strongest beings in the multiverse, perhaps even stronger than the gods he serves. But his strength isn't just in power, it's in restraint, wisdom, and stability. This is what Zamasu never understood. The role of a god isn't to control, it's to maintain balance. Where Zamasu lashed out against chaos, the Grand Priest works above it. He doesn't need to destroy mortals to prove superiority. Simply his superior end. That's enough. He watches over the angels, oversees the gods of destruction, keeps the cosmic wheels turning, not out of ego or desire, but duty. His very existence proves that a true god doesn't need to be feared to be respected. And that's where the Zamasu arc draws its most powerful contrast. Zamasu believed that only through erasure could order be achieved. But the Grand Priest shows that order is built on structure, clarity, and responsibility. One tried to become the world. The other quietly holds the universe together. And yet the Grand Priest never once raises his hand. Because when you're truly divine, you don't have to. The Zamasu arc doesn't just tell the story of a fallen god. It exposes one of Dragon Ball's most dangerous and thought-provoking themes. What happens when the gods themselves lose faith in mortals? Throughout the series, gods have usually been distant, whimsical, or at worst, indifferent. But Zamasu was different. He didn't just judge mortals, he condemned them. And that judgment wasn't born of chaos, it was born of disillusionment. He watched mortals wage war, abuse power, and repeat mistakes. And instead of seeing growth or resilience like Goku and Vegeta did, Zamasu saw only failure and endless cycle of corruption that the gods refused to break. His descent into madness wasn't because he was power-hungry. It was because he genuinely believed he was the only god brave enough to do what the others wouldn't. That idea is the concept that a deity could lose faith so completely that they become a threat to all life is terrifying. Because Zamasu wasn't the strongest villain, he wasn't the most violent or even the most successful, but he was the most righteous in his mind. And belief is harder to defeat than brute force. And here's the chilling truth. Zamasu may be gone, but that idea isn't. What if another god starts to question the purpose of creation? What if someone like a god of destruction, or even an angel, starts to believe that mortals aren't worth protecting? Zamasu was a warning, not just of what a supreme Kai can become, but of what any divine being might become when their ideals go unchecked. Because once gods start losing faith, the universe doesn't burn from war, it erodes from the inside out. Zamasu's story is a cautionary tale unlike any other in the Dragon Ball universe. He began as an idealist, a supreme Kai, who wanted to cleanse the world of what he saw as corruption and chaos. But his path led him to darkness, obsession, and ultimately, destruction. His transformation from divine guardian to cosmic villain challenges everything we thought we knew about gods and Dragon Ball. He wasn't. Just a villain to be defeated, he was a mirror reflecting the dangers of absolute power without absolute wisdom. Yet in his downfall, we also see hope. The gods survived, mortals endured. And the universe continued to turn not, because power alone saved the day, but because of those who stood against tyranny with heart and resilience. From the arrogance of Zamasu to the quiet strength of the Grand Priest, the arc teaches us that true divinity is not about ruling through fear, but guiding with balance. Zamasu's legacy is one of warning, but also of growth, a reminder that even gods must look inward, and that faith in life and creation is the greatest power of all.